Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Historian. Find a comfortable place. Let the sounds of the world outside fade away, and allow the gentle glow of your screen to be like a single candle in a quiet, book-lined study. Tonight, we are not journeying to a battlefield or a throne room in the traditional sense, but to a place just as fraught with strategy, ambition, and peril, the glittering world of the Renaissance court. Did you know that for a nobleman or noblewoman of this era, life itself was the ultimate performance, where a single misspoken word or a clumsy gesture could mean ruin, while a perfectly executed dance step could win you the favor of a prince? It was a life lived on a magnificent and terrifying stage. So take a slow, deep breath and join me as we pull back the velvet curtain. If you enjoy these late-night explorations, do consider subscribing. It helps our small corner of history continue to grow. Now, let us begin. Imagine a grand hall, the air thick with the scent of beeswax, expensive perfume, and wood smoke from a dozen torches flickering in their sconces. The stone walls are draped with heavy tapestries depicting heroic hunts and ancient myths. On a raised dais sits the duke, the prince, or the pope, the center of this glittering universe. And all around him, orbiting like planets around a sun, are the courtiers. They are dressed in silks and velvets of impossible color, their fingers heavy with rings, their necks adorned with gold. This is the court of Urbino, or Mantua, or Florence in the late 15th century. It is the heart of power, culture, and influence. And to survive here, to thrive here, you must understand that you are not simply a person, you are an actor. And this hall is your stage. This was not a new idea, but in the Renaissance, it was refined into a high art form. The medieval knight proved his worth through brute strength and loyalty on the battlefield. The Renaissance courtier had to prove his worth in a far more complex arena. With the rise of powerful city-states and centralized monarchies, nobles were drawn away from their rural castles and into the orbit of the ruling sovereign. Power was no longer just about how many soldiers you could command, but about proximity to the ruler. It was about influence, favor, and grace. And these were currencies earned not with a sword, but with wit, elegance, and a masterful performance of self-control. Every eye was on you, your rivals, your allies, the prince himself. Your life was a constant audition for a role you could never be sure you had secured. If the court was a stage, then there was, of course, a script, a guide to this demanding performance. The most famous and influential of these was written by a man named Baldassare Castiglione. His work, The Book of the Courtier, published in 1528, became the essential handbook for any aspiring noble across Europe. It wasn't a simple book of manners. It was a profound philosophical and practical guide to constructing the perfect courtly persona. Castiglione, through a series of imagined dialogues at the court of Urbino, lays out every quality the ideal courtier must possess. He must be of noble birth, of course, but that was merely the starting point. He must be a warrior, brave and skilled in arms, yet never brutishly so. He must be an athlete, a skilled horseman, a graceful dancer, a capable tennis player. He must be a scholar, knowledgeable in Greek and Latin, history and poetry. He must be an artist, able to draw, to appreciate music, to speak with eloquence. He must, in short, be a living masterpiece, a work of art in human form. But here we come to the most crucial, and perhaps most difficult, part of the performance. Castiglione introduces a concept that is the very soul of the Renaissance ideal, sprezzatura. The word is famously difficult to translate directly into English. It means a certain kind of nonchalance, a way of making the most difficult and practiced actions appear completely effortless, spontaneous, and natural. To have sprezzatura was to perform incredible feats of skill. Whether composing a perfect sonnet on the spot, executing a complex dance move, or delivering a witty retort, and make it all seem as if you've given it no thought at all. It is, in Castiglione's words, a way to conceal all art and make whatever is done or said appear to be without effort and almost without any thought about it. It is the art that hides art. To be seen to be trying too hard was the ultimate failure. It was considered affected, clumsy, a sign that you were not a natural but a striver. The perfect courtier was a swan, gliding gracefully on the surface while paddling furiously and invisibly beneath. Let's consider the costume for this grand play. Clothing in the Renaissance was not merely about protection from the elements or simple modesty. It was the single most visible and immediate statement of your identity, your wealth, your status, and your taste. The fabrics alone were a language. Rich velvets from Italy, shimmering silks from the East, heavy brocades woven with gold and silver thread. These were astronomically expensive. A single outfit for a high-ranking nobleman could cost more than a skilled artisan earned in a decade. The colors were also deeply symbolic. Deep crimsons and scarlets, created from costly dyes, were often reserved for the highest echelons of society. The sheer volume of fabric used, the intricate pleating, the slashing of sleeves to reveal a different colored fabric beneath, the elaborate embroidery. It was all designed to create a silhouette of power and presence. A man's doublet was padded to create a broad chest, his hose tailored to show off a well-formed leg, a key marker of masculine grace at the time. He was, quite literally, shaping his body to fit the ideal. For a noblewoman, the costume was just as critical, but its message was different. Her clothing was designed to display her family's wealth and her own beauty and virtue. The gowns were elaborate, often with detachable sleeves that could be mixed and matched, and bodices that were stiffened to create a rigid, conical torso. The necklines might be cut low to display a pale, smooth expanse of skin, while her hair would be intricately braided and woven with pearls and ribbons. Her performance was one of decorative grace. She was a beautiful object, a testament to her husband's or father's status. The sheer weight and restriction of these clothes must have been immense. Moving, sitting, even breathing would have required conscious effort. Her costume was a beautiful cage, a constant reminder of the constrained role she was expected to play, that of a chaste, beautiful, and silent ornament to her family's lineage. Beyond the costume, there was the script itself, the words spoken. The ideal courtier was not a silent, handsome statue. He had to be a master of conversation. This is where the new wave of humanist education became so vital. A nobleman was expected to be well-versed in the classics, able to quote Virgil or Cicero at a moment's notice. He should be able to discuss philosophy, history, and art with intelligence and insight. But this knowledge was not to be brandished like a club. Again, sprezzatura was key. He had to deploy his learning lightly, with wit and grace. He needed to be a skilled storyteller, able to entertain the company with a clever anecdote. He might be called upon to compose a poem for a lady or set a verse to music on the lute. This intellectual performance was a delicate dance. To know too little made you a bore. To show off your knowledge too aggressively made you a pedant. The goal was to be effortlessly brilliant, to make deep learning seem like a natural part of your charming personality. This performance extended to every social interaction. The court was a web of subtle hierarchies, and your ability to navigate them gracefully was paramount. Wit was a weapon and a shield. A well-timed, clever remark could elevate your status, while a clumsy joke could make you a laughingstock. Conversations were filled with double meanings and veiled insults. You had to be able to read the room, to understand the shifting alliances and hidden rivalries. You were always listening, always observing, always calculating your next line. Even humor was a performance. Castiglione devotes a great deal of space to the art of being funny, distinguishing between graceful, clever wit and coarse, buffoonish joking. The wrong kind of laugh could be as damaging as a poorly aimed sword. It was an exhausting, non-stop mental chess game where the prize was favor and the penalty was obscurity or worse. And then there was the choreography, the physical performance of everyday life. The way a courtier walked, bowed, or gestured was under constant scrutiny. There was a prescribed way to enter a room, to greet someone of higher or lower status, to hold your hands, to sit on a chair. These were not trivial matters. A graceful and controlled physical presence signaled noble breeding and self-mastery. Dancing was particularly important. It was not simply a form of recreation. It was a public demonstration of your grace, your coordination, and your understanding of social rules. The dances of the period, like the slow, stately pavane or the more lively galliard, were complex and highly choreographed. To perform them well, with the requisite air of nonchalance, was a major social accomplishment. It was a courtship ritual, a political statement, and an athletic display all in one. Nowhere was this choreography more intricate than at the dinner table. Dining etiquette became incredibly elaborate during the Renaissance. The fork was a relatively new and fashionable invention in many parts of Europe, and knowing how to use it correctly was a sign of sophistication. There were rules for everything: how to cut your meat, how to drink from your goblet, how to use your napkin. You were not to speak with your mouth full, not to make noise while you chewed, not to put your elbows on the table. These rules were about more than just hygiene. They were about demonstrating that you were civilized, that you had tamed your base animal appetites and achieved a higher state of refinement. A formal banquet was a long, ritualized performance, with dozens of courses served with great ceremony. Your ability to navigate this ritual with flawless grace was yet another test you had to pass, day after day. Of course, a great performance needs a magnificent set, and the Renaissance noble understood this better than anyone. This is where the patronage of art and architecture comes in. When a powerful family like the Medici in Florence or the Sforza in Milan commissioned a painting from Botticelli or Leonardo da Vinci, it was not just because they enjoyed beautiful things. It was a public declaration of their wealth, their piety, their sophistication, and their power. The art they commissioned became part of their public persona. A portrait by a master painter would not just capture a likeness. It would present the sitter in the most idealized light, clothed in finery, surrounded by symbols of their learning and status. These portraits were carefully constructed images, advertisements for the self, designed to be seen and admired by powerful rivals and potential allies. They were the headshots and publicity stills for the performance of their lives. This extended to the very buildings they lived in. The Renaissance saw the construction of magnificent palaces or palazzi in the cities and sprawling villas in the countryside. These were not just homes, they were theaters for living. Architects like Brunelleschi and Alberti were employed to create spaces that were both beautiful and functional for the performance of noble life. There were grand halls for entertaining, private studies for scholarly pursuits, and elegant courtyards for strolling and conversing. Every detail, from the classical symmetry of the facade to the frescoes on the interior walls, was designed to project an image of order, learning, and immense power. To build such a place was to stamp your identity onto the landscape itself, creating a permanent stage for your family's legacy. Your home was the ultimate status symbol, the backdrop against which your entire life was played out. One might wonder, was there ever a moment to relax, to drop the mask? Was there a distinction between the public performance and a private self? The lines were incredibly blurry. Even personal letters were often written with the knowledge that they might be shared or read by others. They were an opportunity to craft a persona, to present oneself as witty or pious or loyal. Diaries, like the one kept by the Florentine merchant Luca Landucci, seem to offer a more private glimpse, but even they are often concerned with reputation and public events. It seems the performance was so all-encompassing that it may have become second nature. The mask may have, over time, fused with the face. The constant self-monitoring, the awareness of being watched, was a fundamental part of the noble identity. Perhaps the only true private moments were in prayer or in the throes of illness. But even then, one had to perform the role of the pious Christian or the stoic sufferer. For noblewomen, the performance was even more restrictive and relentlessly judged, while a man's performance was about active accomplishment. In arms, in wit, in politics, a woman's was largely about passive virtues. Her central role was to be chaste, silent, and obedient. Her honor, and by extension her family's honor, rested on her sexual purity before marriage and her fidelity within it. Her every action was scrutinized for any hint of impropriety. Her education was designed to make her a charming companion, not an independent thinker. She learned to sing, play an instrument, and dance. She learned enough letters to manage a household, but she was not encouraged to engage in the kind of intellectual debates that men enjoyed. Her stage was primarily the domestic sphere, and her role was to be the graceful, beautiful, and fertile center of that world, securing her family's lineage through the production of male heirs. It was a performance with very little room for improvisation, and beneath the shimmering surface of all this grace and elegance there was a dark and constant pressure. The stakes of this performance were incredibly high. A social misstep, a clumsy dance, a foolish comment, these were not minor embarrassments. They could lead to ridicule, loss of favor, and social isolation. Malicious gossip was a constant threat, a weapon used by rivals to destroy reputations. The court was a place of intense competition, and everyone was vying for the same limited resource, the prince's attention and favor. This created an atmosphere of paranoia and anxiety. You had to be constantly on your guard, trusting no one completely. The serene, effortless expression of the courtier in a Bronzino portrait often hides a mind racing with calculation and fear. When the performance failed, or when one's honor was publicly challenged, the consequences could be deadly. The concept of honor was the bedrock of the noble identity. An insult, however small, could be a stain that had to be washed away with blood. This led to the highly ritualized practice of dueling. If a man's word was questioned or his courage doubted, he might be forced to challenge the offender to a duel with swords or pistols. These were not chaotic brawls. They were formal affairs, with their own complex rules of engagement and etiquette. To refuse a challenge was to be branded a coward and face social ruin. To fight and die was to preserve your honor. It was the ultimate, tragic final act in the play of a nobleman's life, a testament to how seriously this performance of self was taken. The polished floor of the ballroom could, with a single word, lead to a blood-soaked field at dawn. So what are we to make of this world of performance and artifice? When we visit a museum today and stand before a portrait by Titian or Holbein, we are looking at the carefully preserved remnants of these performances. The subjects of these paintings are not showing us their true, unvarnished selves. They are presenting the persona they spent their entire lives constructing. The calm gaze, the rich fabrics, the symbolic objects held in their hands. It is all part of the act. They are performing for us, even across the centuries. They are showing us not necessarily who they were, but who they wanted to be, and who they wanted the world to remember them as. Their success is so complete that we often take the performance for the reality. As the night deepens and our story comes to a close, let's picture that Renaissance court one last time. The music has faded, the dancers have retired. The torches are burning low, casting long, dancing shadows on the tapestries. The courtiers, the actors, have retreated to their chambers. Perhaps, in the quiet of his room, a nobleman lets his shoulders slump for the first time all day. Perhaps he removes the padded doublet, the stiff collar, and with it, the weight of the day's performance. He is no longer the witty scholar, the graceful dancer, the fearsome warrior, but just a man, tired and anxious about the next day's scenes. For in the Renaissance, life was not something to be simply lived. It was something to be crafted, polished, and performed. It was a beautiful, demanding, and sometimes deadly work of art. Thank you for joining me here at the Sleepy Historian. I hope this story has given you something peaceful to ponder as you drift off. Until next time, sleep well.